Hey Restorers, welcome to this very exciting episode of Phil and Michelle's Happy Hour. I always have to check myself introing podcasts to make sure I'm going to say the right thing. So I love doing happy hours with Phil. I only have water with me today. I don't know. We are recording it during happy hour and maybe weren't so on top of that today. I think the gentleman I'm with also maybe like wine. We should have planned this a little bit better, but water. What are we thinking? But anyway, Phil and I are joined by Mike Hopkins Sr., who is the COO of Paul Davis. Very excited to have Mike here today. I know I've gotten to do podcasts with him in the past, and he's written for CNR, and he's just a great thought leader in the industry, a great leader in general. So we are going to talk all things restoration today, Paul Davis, leadership, what's going on in the industry, all of the things. So Mike, welcome. I'm going to toss it over to you to kind of introduce yourself and share a little bit about your journey and background in the industry.
Thanks, Michelle. As always, it's a pleasure. Spending time with you and Phil is anytime I can get with you is terrific. And I love your perspective on the industry. You've definitely got your fingers on the pulse of what's going on in our business. And so appreciate the time to be here. Yeah, a little bit about my background. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at Paul Davis. And I would say that my path here was not a linear one, but there was some commonality through the way back in college many years ago. I had the opportunity to be a College Pro Painters franchisee, and that was part of the FirstService brands of companies at that time. And I learned how to run a business and had 9 employees the first summer and 27 the second. And then went on for a brief time to work corporately at College Pro Painters because I knew that I didn't have what it took leadership-wise to go to the next stage of where I wanted to go in business. And so jumped in on that full steam ahead. Loved what was happening there, enjoyed getting the opportunity to recruit and train and coach some of the sharpest college students in the nation, but particularly in an area around Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, and Michigan, to be business owners, and had a ball with that, except they all needed to grow up and move on in their lives. And so that was tough for me. I'm a long-term relationship guy. Blessed to have been married over 31 years now to my wife, and really grateful for that. And that's evidenced in I'm not good at saying goodbye to 90% of the humans and starting over next year again. Anyway, long and short of it, that led to being a part of one of our other sister brands called CertaPro Painters. Very involved there. At one point or another, owned 7 of those franchises. Very, very involved there. And was always fascinated because CertaPro Painters, being part of FirstService, when FirstService acquired Paul Davis in '97, absolutely curious about that because I thought I love to help people. I love to see businesses at scale, and Paul Davis was all of that. So even then, what some people don't know, I don't know if I've shared this with either of you, is about 25 years ago, I looked to buy a Paul Davis franchise here locally. We live in the Cleveland area, and that owner at the time said, no, we're selling it to 2 of our associates. And that's how it went. And they've become very good friends of my wife and mine. And it was a cool journey. So Rich Wilson and I have known each other for a very long time. He's our CEO. And I just love this industry. So we talked about it a lot. And I was around Paul Davis circles at Better Practices forums and a few things like that. But began to really look deeper at Paul Davis over time when I was doing some consulting after we sold our business, and was really interested in it. And Rich and I had a good long talk about some need after he had been on for just maybe 3 months at Paul Davis. So early 2015 or into that early summer, and ended up at Paul Davis. I started at Paul Davis, though, very much inside out. So, I run businesses, have coached people who own small businesses. And so that's where it all began, coaching people to run businesses where I would discover where they wanted to go and then talk about what kind of plan needed to be built to help them get there if they weren't already there. And if they were already there, then what's the next stage of your business? So that's how I ended up at Paul Davis. And now really the responsibility of our franchise network success is something that I take, in my area of accountability. So really thankful for it. Love the opportunity, and don't take it for granted. So, yep.
Perfect.
Wow, very nice. We'll unpack a whole bunch of that because so first of all, just to say, Paul Davis is very fortunate to have you there. You and Rich are a great team, and you're a great leader and a great representative of that organization. So I think as we get into some of the success stories from your franchise group, we're going to clearly see your hands all over that. But one of the things you had said, you'd mentioned earlier, like when your introduction, you said Michelle and I had our kind of impact, or at least our eye or vision on the future of the industry and what's going on. Um, Before we get into your story, I want to dig into that question a little bit and take it from your perspective. Okay, you get to see. First of all, you tell me how many franchises you have, but I believe it's probably over 450. And you get to see a bigger kind of a view of the world than most people are sitting in their own companies. And this has been it's been a really interesting 12 months, maybe 18 months in restoration, and things have fundamentally changed from what people expected. And what are you seeing like currently in the last, let's say in the last 90 days, last 6 months, that you see as your thought will continue to play out over the next 12 months? And what restorers should do to be prepared or deal with that? How does it look differently?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, a lot. It's interesting. Having been at Paul Davis for the last 10 years, it's been just long enough to see some cycles, right? And it was a very unique year for all of us. Many of us spent a lot of time, effort, and got to help a lot of people through a lot of storms in 2024. And then into 2025, well, that didn't really happen, right? I mean, there were some spike events where certainly people helped, but there weren't as many of those. And so I think for a lot of us, when we look at the industry itself, right, you've got really a reshuffling of the deck for a lot of our carrier partners, right? They maybe are lessening or, pun intended, mitigating risk in some areas. And in other, so they may be building up in other areas where there's less issues there of severity. There's certainly an increased amount of deductibles, right? We're seeing deductibles climb. We're seeing fear in the insured that have concern that maybe I'll lose my policy if I put a claim in. And so what that's really turned into is I think all of us need to be in a position where we're less dependent upon weather-driven events and realize that there is a lot of need out there. I think, Michelle, you and I have talked about this, I think, on the air before, that, look, we're like emergency rooms for people, right? Nobody wants to go. Everybody wants good care when something happens, and something is happening. And so this is a time and season where not only have we seen the need for data change, that's been crazy to watch over the last 10 years. So we need to be great business people, but we need to deliver a continuous and deliberate focus on customer experience. And we also need to be willing to go get it. So for a lot of folks who used to be basically order takers trying to keep up with demand, right? It was really an issue of capacity. Now it's a matter of, hey, we also need to learn to get out there and ask for the sale. So
Yep.
we might be competing with people who are outside of our industry on the rebuild, for instance. Right now, we may know as folks who are from the property restoration side of things that we can do it the right way, but when someone gets cashed out, they're going to get a lot. They're going to get a lot of bids. So we need to be able to compete in that space. So I would say that's a couple of things I would say is budget for no storms and get it, make a plan and then go execute and be good. Get good at sales if you're not.
What are a couple ways that you've been coaching your franchisees kind of through this last 12 to 18 months when it has been slower and it has shifted so much? Everything that you said is so true. So what are a couple of ways that you've been coaching your franchisees to kind of work through this and become better at the sales and getting their own work?
Yeah, well, we do a lot of training in that area, right? So it's not just general selling skills. We have lots of training for that available. And then we have specific training available for specific situations.
Okay.
So whether that's working with a carrier, working with an EGA, getting to know them and how do you market well to them, but then also just quite frankly, being in a situation where we're teaching it all the way up to our tech level, where our technician knows how to ask a homeowner for the full service work that we provide, right? So if we're doing mitigation, there's no reason why we're not doing the reconstruction. And we teach those team members also, because they're our front line out there. They are our brand being represented, how to actually ask for that sale in a way that's a winsome way and in confidence knowing that we can deliver it.
Perfect. Phil, you have a
Wow.
follow-up
Okay.
to that?
So
Okay.
something that was something I caught that was very deliberate, but I'm not sure that it was a nuance in that answer. You had said something that we train all the way up to the technician versus what most people think is we train all the way down to the technician, our frontline people. And I think that that really wants to, I'm going to tie that into something that I think is important about you and your brand and some of just this thought process. Let's talk about culture. Let's talk about the culture of Paul Davis. And I think that that is quite unique and very, very deliberate. And I don't think people understand how important that can be in success. And so as a franchisor, you've got to talk about this, I'm sure, quite a lot. And so it's deliberate at your level, but then in down to each one of those individual companies that are working directly with the consumers. Yeah, I think it's deliberate everywhere. So explain a little bit about culture, your thoughts on culture, where that plays in leadership in an organization, and then how you guys have leveraged that in the brand.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yes, all the way up to the technician is deliberate. Um, I think in our organization, I would just like to say that it's much, we all work in the construction area, right? So we can picture moving a very long ladder, right? If you move it a little bit at the bottom, it moves very far at the top.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to remember the foot of the ladder is Rich Wilson, right? Our CEO. And literally, we're talking about feet that are either planted or firmly put on the soil or on pavement in a safe setting, right? Well, his words and his actions, just a little bit of movement creates big movement at the top. The very top of the ladder is our affected customer, right? So that's who gets impacted the most. And when you work your way down the ladder, if you will, right, you've got affected customers, you've got clients who might be a carrier or a commercial partner along the way, and that's adjusters and folks like that. And then you work your way to obviously our technicians in the field and down the ladder to myself and then Rich. And so we're really passionate about that. The other thing that I would say is that we really believe in our vision statement, our mission statement, and our core values, right? Our vision statement is that we provide extraordinary care while we serve people in their time of need, right? Nobody wants us to be there. I said it earlier, everyone wants good care, and quite frankly, they deserve good care. And then our mission is that we provide opportunities for great people to deliver best-in-class results. And when you say great people, a lot of folks wonder what that means. So to us, I would define that as someone who has a sincere heart to serve other people, right? That's first. That's a given. The second is they need to have a history of great results, because part of great culture is, yes, take care of people. And oh, by the way, we need to deliver. We need to get the job done, right? The way we promised. So we need to have a history of growing and taking care of people at the same time. And then lastly, they need to have values that are congruent with our brand. And for us, there's really four that we key up on, that there are our focus, are our core values. It's respect the individual, deliver what you promise, have pride in what you do, and practice continuous improvement. And so with all that in mind, I would just say, I liken it this way. A little bit of a rant. So hopefully it's tolerable. The first is that we expect one another to live our vision, our mission, and our values. And we've got some serving basics and other things like that I won't get into right now, but that's the foundation of what we believe, and we all agree on those. And by agreeing on those, we can say we can celebrate them, which I believe accelerates things. But we also need to be assertive when we lead, to call out when someone's not there. If I make a mistake there, and I might have been a little too aggressive on a topic, right? But it ends up being about a person a little more than the topic. I feel great about someone saying, I didn't feel like you respected the individual there, right? So let's talk about that, and everyone is involved. And then lastly, I would say, one of our objectives is to inspire people, but not through a great speech, through great results. So, no one can have all these other things, but not have great results. So I'll pause there on that. But and the reason you talked about culture, I should lean into your question a little bit. How it works and why it works is it's clear expectations. We all agree on them. And I could tell you a story about, him, a man named Bill Horn. reviewing them for the very first time in front of me. The other thing is repetition. Like it's over and over and over and over again. Like our team knows our vision. They know our mission statement. They know our core values. And then the last thing is the accountability that I already talked about.
Talk a little bit about, I want to lean into this a little bit more. There's a lot of people interested in entering the restoration space, and
Sure.
there's people, there's consolidation happening in the industry. But I know that Paul Davis owners in particular, I think, come from a lot of different walks of life. Like there's a owner in Metro Detroit I know that was high up in GM, I think in marketing. And so that's such an interesting journey to me to go from high up in one of the big three to owning and running a Paul Davis. And I've been to his facility. It's very cool. He has some cool things happening in there. But talk about the journey and kind of where a lot of your owners come from, because I think a lot of them do come from outside the space. So what are they looking for that the industry brings them?
You know, when you look at our industry, quite frankly, sure, we can have years where weather's not what we expect and we didn't plan well enough to adapt, right? But the truth is, we have so much. Um, how do I say this the right way? Well, the economy is not that much of a concern, right? We're a
Yes,
little bit resistant to what goes in the economy. Now, it doesn't mean it doesn't affect us some. It does. We all know that.
it does.
At the same time, what we have found was that we're looking for a little bit different kind of owner candidate, where really since about 2017, we've really teed up on folks who have run bigger organizations, built teams, and then they align well with that great person definition that I talked about before. What we know for sure is that we have a world-class training team, and we can get them up to speed on what it takes to do this industry well. What they bring to the table are unique skills. Here's another thing that, you talk about, I guess I would say bottom-up leadership, is that we know that over time, what they bring is they bring something special into our network that we might not have. So whenever I'm at meetings with these franchise candidates, and I do ask them, what would you uniquely add to our network? Like it's not a question of like, hey, why would we select you? That's not the point of the question. The question is, what's unique about you? Because what we know is that great ideas are best found through a lot of people. And boy, if we can curate those great ideas, they percolate down to home office where we can test them and see what's working and then roll them out. And with the vast variety of owners that we have, I know exactly who you're talking about there. And I'm so grateful for guys like him that bring these unique skills in our market. And they also, by the way, very importantly, really, really do fit the values very well. And so we hold to that. So I would just tell you this, when I am in the process of approving, there's a lot of great candidates that come across that we meet with, and we say no quite a bit. And the reason is because if it's a green light on someone, it's a go. If it's a yellow light, it's a red light. So meaning if there's something that goes, I think they'd be okay here, then the answer is no. And the reason is because we want to operate with people over a long period of time. This isn't, and our folks are investing a lot. Some people invest, a majority of their retirement into getting going in this business. And we want it to be something that they're really proud that they did. Their family talks about for years that, hey, my mom or dad had this incredible business that I got to be part of maybe as well. So we're really careful who we say yes to, but the culture of that is really looking for people who want to run big scalable businesses. And there are other brands out there that don't want to do that, and that's okay. That's absolutely fine. There's plenty of room in the industry for that. In our particular case, our objective is to bring in people that want to run large scalable businesses.
Okay.
So one of the things, a couple things you mentioned there, you talk about people as owners in these companies, but I've also noticed in working with a bunch of with your company-owned stores and with some of your more successful franchises that's pushed down, at least in those locations, and maybe it's system-wide, to the people working in the company. And so you spend a lot of time with screening through calipers, the caliper test, through goal setting and reviews, and having a hierarchy and organization and a communication structure. So I'm assuming that's deliberate. And is there something to maybe tie further into that and how you think about good good companies being run by good leaders, and good leaders having a really solid team behind them.
Yeah,
So yeah, there's a question in there somewhere. You can fish it out.
yeah, no, I'm tracking with what you're saying, Phil. I would just tell you this, that what leadership is what, a business rise or falls on. And it's not, honestly, it looks very different than it looked in the 80s, right? Right now, it really is dependent upon people having the opportunity to grow. I think there's a few things that people are really passionate about in their work. The first is that they want to be known. They want to know if they're winning, and they want to know if they're making a difference in the world. And then as those things are happening, they want to be provided with opportunities to be challenged to grow when they're having success. And in order to grow when they're having success, they've got to they need to learn new skills. And so when our best franchisees put together their business plans, they're not just putting together business plans that are about marketing and selling and producing and collecting work, right? Collecting jobs and taking care of homeowners and business owners. They're also looking at developmental plans necessary for their team members to be able to have the skill to go to the next level. And so that's something that I would say, I can't tell you how many times if I look at where someone has struggled, most of the time I see a lack of leadership development skills in that office, and we provide loads of that here at Paul Davis. Whether someone thinks they've had training in it or not, we have it available to them if they'd like it. And the folks that run furthest, fastest are the ones who dig in most in that area.
How do
So I'm
you?
going to follow up question that too, Michelle. Let me go on this one.
Yep.
Okay, so the next generation of employees coming in are substantially different than the let's say the ones that we've been hiring traditionally. And how are you advising your franchisees and just the restoration companies to embrace this next culture? And what does it look like that's different than previously?
I will tell you one of the things I love the next generation that's coming in. One of the things that I've noticed is that they don't want to work without a purpose. And so our industry is a really, really good fit for that generation that's coming in right now. However, they've spent their time on, a screen for far too long. They may not have the relational training that they need, or the relational side of the business might even cause them some anxiety. And that's why for us, that leadership skill development program is very simple. I mean, we could be talking about things like how to resolve a conflict, right? To how to have an effective meeting, for someone who's, being a people leader, things that coaching, right? Things that you wouldn't think would need to necessarily be taught. How to navigate a customer conflict and treat others with respect. What does that mean? So we actually train on these things to help with those skills. We certainly train on the skills necessary in the field skills. But, that's sort of like most airlines have the same planes. What makes one airline better than another, right? It's all the other stuff in between. So I think that's the piece of it. And we want to build a career path for the folks that come on, right? Some folks want to stay a technician their whole life, and that's great, right? But at the same time, they can grow in their skills there.
Yep.
And so we're passionate about all that, whether it's field skills, but the leadership development skills are the things that help them both at work and home.
I just saw a post today of a restoration company celebrating a technician's 41st anniversary at their company.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
That's awesome. I was thinking, that would make a good profile. So that I'm
Yes,
looking
it
into
would.
that. But you are exactly right in that, Mike. There are some people that just truly love that role. And again, you're, being at the top. Yeah, it's, I think we sometimes in professional life feel like people always have to grow or move up. And sometimes that's not where people want to be. And finding a place for them to be successful where they want to be and where they feel rewarded is everything.
Well, when you say that, Michelle, the thing that sticks out for me too, and one of the things I love about our industry is they can get certifications in the skills.
Yeah.
Right. So in our world, they can get certifications in the skills in leadership, which they can still use on their daily job.
Yep.
But in addition to that, they can get all these different skills and certifications that are available to them as technicians in the field. And boy, the depth of knowledge is amazing to watch and see.
Yeah.
In our business, I love listening to our people that are really technically skilled with the field skills talk. And occasionally I'll go, what? Really? They just some really neat learning that goes on there.
I was going to ask you
I'll
as
give
a
you a book.
Go ahead.
I'm just going to say, I'm going to give you a book nugget on that. So there's a Robin Sharma. It's up here on my bookshelf, somewhere behind me. It's The Leader Who Had No Title. and it talks of this follows a fictional character who, through his career, is in a position that people would not perceive it to be as leader, just a position. It's like, oh no, you get to be a leader wherever you are, and how
Mhm.
you express and how you fill your job. And so that's really fantastic. And that's I don't, it doesn't get lost in the fact that you can have a technician that is a leader.
Yes.
So, Michelle,
100%.
yeah.
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 Well, my question was following up on kind of all this leadership discussion because you talked about, how you've built up other leaders, but how do you stay fresh in your leadership journey and understand the next generation and continue to be a good leader as business and the world and the economy and everything just continue to evolve?
Well, keep up with CNR. That's one way.
Thanks.
Uh, No,
Thanks, Mike.
I'm not joking. Actually,
Yeah.
your stuff's very important.
Thank
So I
you.
think there's that. There's industry journals that you can be reading, and I also think a lot of people lose sight of the fact that we really need to be up on the most current things. So
Hmm.
I'm a big fan of anything HBR, Harvard Business Review
Yep.
type of work. I love to study and learn and read different business books that are out there. I also, though, operate in our business as an examiner of some of the skill, well, actually, all the ones that are available at Paul Davis. And so that's a great way to do it as well. So I'll work with a team member who wants to get certified, say, in the skill of priority management. And that's a great way
Mm.
to sharpen the saw yourself. And
Yep.
then I like to get feedback on things that I do as well. So I'll have people give me written feedback on a meeting that we recently had, something like that, right? Using our competency model, because well, we all need to be practicing continuous improvement. And quite frankly, I want to be better. I've seen way too many businesses where a leader at a certain level gets eclipsed because their skill doesn't stay ahead of where the business is going.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's true. Okay, Phil, where do you want to take it?
Well, okay, let's talk about technology because I think that that's
Mm.
one of you're gonna see that coming up in an upcoming article of mine. It's one of the big drivers in the industry, and whether we talk about AI or we talk about just technology, and technology is amplifying the skill set of everybody within the company. So I don't see a world where we've got robots running restoration companies or AI making decisions, but I see that as a great resource to really amplify the value of the individuals in a company. How do you approach technology as somebody who's driving this huge machine of many companies, but also knowing the importance of it and the importance of acting deliberately and smartly, maybe quickly, but not carelessly.
Mm, good point. Nobody wants to be in the 95% of failed AI exercises, right?
No.
But the
95.
problem is
I feel
not.
like it's higher than that, but
Yeah,
thank
yeah,
you.
yeah. I've heard higher and I've heard 90, but we don't want 95 is a big number,
It is.
right? So to be there, I think there's a deliberate need, first of all, to look at what we're doing with it. So when we look at technology, I'll go first to opportunity. I think that the biggest thing we need to be looking at is what can we automate in a
Hmm.
in a safe way that doesn't have to do so much thinking for us that we're worried about accuracy, first of all, right? So if there's a repetitive task that we're doing every day that we can find a way to do it. And look, I know that some of the estimatics platforms right now are working on just this, and we're spending time with them, doing some beta work and playing in that sandbox with them to get it ready, because I firmly believe that everything that is going to work well is going to start in the field. So if it doesn't make it easier
Mm.
for our technicians in the field, at least on the mitigation side and triaging
Yep.
projects, and then on the reconstruction side, eventually AI being a point where help there. So it needs to be first focused on the actual business use of what we do every day. So what I mean by that is, if it
Mm.
doesn't help our franchisee and their teams, and which includes our owned operations, be more efficient in what they do and more accurate to what's expected of us, then we shouldn't play in that sandbox. Um, a concern, obviously, is we just need to be really, really careful with other people's data and other people's information, right? So in this process, we need to align with all of our partners in such a way that we're treating, their intellectual property with respect.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Phil, any follow-ups that you want to do there?
Uh,
I was
not
gonna.
not a follow up. I do have a question about a different. Just go to a different subject.
Perfect.
if we're ready for that.
Yep.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about mergers and acquisitions, and you guys have been a player in that market, both because your franchisees are being sold. Some of it's internal. I love when an employee buys out and becomes an owner. But there's some that's happening top down. You guys are buying locations. You're buying independent companies. You're buying let's say giving an exit plan to some of your franchisees, and you're partnering with some of them. And so you guys have a number of models going. That's a trend that was sort of quiet this last year, economy driven probably, but I see it coming back with a little more force this next year. And so you're a player in that market, or you're an observer as well. So kind of all those things. So I'm going to give you a big platform to take that discussion in one of a number of directions, or all those directions if you wish. So.
Yeah, so I would first say that, look, I think there's a lot of pressure in that space right now,
Mm-hmm.
in that, when some of these acquisitions happen, the balance sheet pressure can be tremendous. And so we're not in that. We don't have that pressure, and we're grateful for that. We do look, I mean, look, mergers and acquisitions is not a strategy, it's a strategic tactic. And so, to me, in our world, and so, yeah, we have looked, and we do have some folks that we've acquired that were, independents. What we find most of the time is that we'll get a deck with great information on the company, great numbers, and we go visit, and we just don't quite have a cultural fit.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I do have high hopes that we may find some more of those folks, particularly in Northern California and some areas like that. But I would say, though, that in all these spaces, for as much as we're seeing the industry change over time, and more we're seeing consolidation,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you see that with the carriers, and you're seeing that with restorers. Hey, we love nothing more than to partner with someone who's like-minded in our core values and our vision and our mission. It's not a huge part of what we do, but there's lots of opportunities for people who want to be franchisees in our network to enter, but also for our franchisees to sell. We're a desirable brand out there because people know what they're getting.
Yeah, absolutely. Phil, any follow-up to the M&A before I change the subject?
Not to M&A. I have one last question, because it was somebody, I don't know if somebody suggested it, but I read Paul Davis's biography. What an interesting man. And I'm disappointed that I never made the effort to get to meet him.
Yeah.
A couple things. I was remarkable how many things that he pioneered, that he created in the industry. And I think maybe because it was a smaller franchise at the time, and so it's easy to overlook some of those things. So he was an innovator, and he created some things that were really powerful in the franchise world and in the restoration world in general, that were pretty amazing. How do you take that innovative culture and the character of who he was, and then make sure that as you expand, you get further and further away? So he's passed away. He's been out of the organization for quite some time, and you maintain, I think, a lot of those core values. And how do you maintain that? How do you make sure that that's front and center for people who didn't know that there was a Paul Davis? So yeah, so take it from there.
Boy,
That's a
I'll tell you
great
what,
question.
what an amazing man. I had the opportunity, before he passed, for some years, to get to spend time with him on and off, and loved it. So we would bring him into our owner's school and just basically sit him up. He'd just sit up front and talk anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours about how this whole thing got started. So we would block 2 hours. And he just was a gem of a human. His core values align so well with what we do, and that is alive and well. So when you look at our vision, our mission, and our core values, I remember, sitting with Bill Horn, and I showed these to him, and we actually have this thing called a belief book. It happens to be sitting on my desk, and it walks through them. And I had Bill Horn read through them, and he just paused. And I said, "What do you think?" He paused, and he looked up, and he said, "It's just who we are."
Hmm.
and Paul Davis is one of his best friends. And so when I think about the man Paul Davis, he said, he who serves best profits most. And I couldn't agree more in so many ways.
Yeah.
And there's so many little, Mr. Davis isms through our organization. It's still alive and well. You walk into our training center and there's a big picture of him right there. And he was a gentleman who ran his business like one and treated other people like ladies and gentlemen as well. And so that is just really alive and well. And we tell the story often, and every single person who comes through our Meet the Team, which is where franchisees are vetted, they all get a copy of that book. And it's very important that they know and understand who the person is that started this whole thing. 60, we're having our 60th anniversary this next year.
Wow.
It's been decade after decade after decade of just standing on the shoulders of people who foundationally have set a trajectory that we can then take, maintain, and accelerate. And so I'm really proud to be able to walk around with a logo on that says Paul Davis, right? When people say, "Tell me more about that," and I get the opportunity to do so. But yeah, the spirit of how he started this is very alive and well.
I love that.
So you had mentioned Bill Horn a couple times. I'll bring that to the people who don't know this. I read the book, right? So he was the first franchisee in Louisville, Kentucky. So yeah, that's the name Bill Horn there. Now run by his son Charlie.
Yep, doing a great
Michelle.
job. Yeah.
Nothing. I was just, I loved that quote. He who serves best profits most. That's a great quote. So, okay. So that kind of leads us into the next and maybe wrap up kind of discussion here of, we're recording this in December. So we always ask people for a favorite story or something that they want to share about the values of the company or anything like that, like something just cool to wrap us up with. We were talking a little bit about this offline. So Mike, share a little bit about it. It goes more into the core values of Paul Davis. Some of the things that you, as a company overall, are passionate about.
Well, I'll tell you, this time of year, the holiday is so commercialized, right?
Yes.
And it's funny. I love giving gifts, but I don't necessarily love getting them. Strange. But I would just say this. All of us in this industry are really passionate about giving back, or we wouldn't get involved in the first place, right? You could say you do this for the money, and the truth is that's not what gets you out of bed at 2 a.m. to go take care of someone who's had a fire, right? That's just not how it works over time. It might for a short while, but it doesn't for a long time. And so we're really passionate about that. Internally we have a thing through First Service called First Serve Others. We love that. That's where people have been through a tough time in our organizations can go and get a grant to get some help. That's one thing we do, but I would say something practical. Another one that I really love that we do is we do some work with the Child Cancer Fund there in Jacksonville. And it's a really special event. I love being a part of that every year where you've got kiddos and families that are stricken by childhood cancer. And we get a chance to give financially to it, to encourage these kiddos, encourage these families. They have a very practical way of supporting it. So I don't know for those who are watching or listening today, where you're at geographically, but I can promise you there's something around you that you know and respect that's taking care of people in their time of need beyond our business. I just say, put down a few lattes for a while and send a little money that way, and just know that you're giving a special gift to someone in that time. So maybe it's one less gift this year, but that's something that I would encourage that we're passionate about as well. Is we want to give back, and I would say this as well, that look, none of us runs a nonprofit, and that's okay. That we want people to make money on purpose, and we want people to have intentional events where they are doing some sort of charity work on purpose. So I would just encourage people during the holiday season to do some of that charity work on purpose, whatever that might look like for you.
I love it.
That's really fantastic. So one thing you had mentioned, this first serve others. That is unique to your company, but I did work with one other company that did something very similar, and they were a larger company. They were probably 20 million in revenue, so they had additional resources. They actually set up a fund and had a group of employees that would then vote on need within the company. If there was somebody who had to be out because they were ill, they had a problem with the family, they had something like that, and then the company and the employees would distribute those funds to places in need, and it created teamwork. camaraderie, some sort of a social, like a safety net for some of those employees. And maybe it was just somebody who had to take a kid and couldn't go to work that day. And it's like, okay, well, I'll be able to fill in and take some time for whatever it was. So you mentioned, yeah, it's only relevant to the Paul Davis world, but people can create something like that internally in their own organization and make a difference in their business as well. So I'm glad you guys are doing that, and also encourage other people to think about charity closer to their business or their home as well. So great.
Yes.
I'm glad you guys are doing that. Fantastic.
Mike, thank you so much for joining us. This was so fun having you here and getting all of your wisdom and stories and all of the things. Any final thoughts that you want to share before we wrap it up?
Hey, I'm grateful for you all. I mean, I really think that you're bringing the industry together. You know, we're all in this together, and there's so much work. There's so many people who need our help, and I'm thankful to be part of it, and I'm proud to be part of, the property restoration world. So I appreciate that, and wish you all happy holidays.
Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New
Yeah.
Year.
Merry
Mike,
Christmas.
Mike and Phil, thank you so much. This was a great episode. For people who are listening, you can find all of our episodes on the CNR website and on the CNR YouTube under the Phil and Michelle Happy Hour playlists. And we will see you all in the new year. Thanks, gentlemen.